Yes, there is a cow in the workshop. And why is he here? You're gonna have to stick around, watch the entire video to find out why. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Homebuilt Workshop. I hope you're all doing awesome. Today we're gonna build a wooden cow. Well, I guess not quite a cow, but more like a little wooden calf. This little guy is going to be a training aid for different events that you might encounter horseback, whether you need to drag a cow out on the ranch for branding or doctoring or something like that. In this case, it's mainly going to be used for practicing for horse show events, but either way, it's going to be fun, not really too hard to make. And who doesn't want a little wooden cow? To build this thing, we're not using any fancy materials. We got some treated 2x6 material. We're going to use some 6-inch treated fence post material. And really, that's about it. A few bolts, some screws. To make this process go a little bit faster, I've made up a couple of acrylic templates. One of them is a very crude representation of a leg. We're going to make 4 of these. And I also have this little acrylic template. You guys probably can't see that. It's clear. We're going to use that to cut out the head. Just some regular hardware store lumber here, nothing super fancy, so let's start cutting. I'm going to cut down a couple of the offcuts to use to make the head. Before gluing them up, I'll joint the edges with a hand plane to make sure I get a good glue joint. I always forget how running Titebond 3 is every time I use it. I got way too much here. There we go. That'll give us a piece large enough to make this little cow's head. Now, alternatively, I could have just used a larger piece of wood to make the head. I could have just used a piece of a 2x8, but I didn't want to have to buy a whole 2x8 to get a section that's less than a foot long, so this is a good way to do it. Plus, I think gluing this up is going to make the piece a little bit stronger. Since I now have this piece a little bit wider, I can cut the head instead of going with the grain. I can kind of put the grain at more of a 45-degree angle to the head, which will help it resist snapping off if it gets bumped. If I were to do it just straight, it's a good chance that the wood's just going to break on the grain line, so hopefully this makes it a little bit stronger. At least that's what I'm shooting for. While we're waiting for the glue to dry, it's time to start cutting out the legs. On this first leg, I used some double-sided tape to stick my template to the piece. I was intending to use the router to flush trim this, but I ended up going a different direction. I felt it start bumping. With this particular saw, probably most saws really, once that blade starts to go, I can feel it kind of shaking, and I was hoping I could get all the way down to the end before that happened, but we didn't make it. Dang it. Hold please, while I change a blade. Now, originally my plan was to route this flush with a template using a router. I don't think for this project that's going to be necessary. As long as I trace it out, cut it on the line, it's going to be just fine. The only other thing I really need to do with this template is to mark these holes so I can drill them out later. Plus, that'll save on double-sided tape. If you guys want to know what double-sided tape I prefer to use, I'm going to put a link in the description to a video I did on talking about just that. Now I can grab another leg, I'll trace out my pattern, and repeat that process a few more times. Let's try this trick. Ooh! Remember this trick? Ready? I don't know how those Instagrammers and YouTubers do it. I'm going to cut these out now. Hey, quit pulling my leg.
Once I have all the legs cut out, I'll use my oscillating spindle sander to clean up all those cut edges. Now we can fire up the drill press, and I'll drill the holes for the threaded rods which will attach the legs. I want to keep that rounded edge that a 2x6 normally has, so I'm going to go back through with a 1/4 inch roundover bit and round over all the edges.
There's our 4 wooden cow legs. Not a cow leg, a cow leg. Ever been kicked by a wooden cow? Me neither. But I've been kicked by lots of real cows. Now we're going to move on and make his head. The process for making this is going to be exactly the same as the legs. I'll trace out my pattern onto my piece of wood, cut it out on the bandsaw, and then I'll round it all over to soften the edges. So now our little guy's got legs, he's got a head, but he doesn't have a body. What are we going to make that out of? Voila! A body. This is a piece of reclaimed fence post. This is about a 6-inch diameter fence post. It's going to work perfect. The length is about 25.5 inches long. I think it's going to work perfect. Now this thing is a little bit splintery, so I'm going to grab some heavy-duty leather gloves and we're going to sand this down lightly just to get some of the splinters off. I'm not trying to make this any sort of perfect finish because, well, it is a reclaimed fence post and this whole thing's going to get dragged through the dirt and dust, and we just want to try to remove some of those splinters. Now to get the legs lined up, I've got some scraps of MDF here, which looks like it's going to space the legs right about exactly where I need them. I've also got some other scraps that I'm using as a spacer to get the same spacing from the back edge. Now the tricky part, hold all these in place with a clamp without them moving. I lost a leg. There's your legs, little guy.
Using an extra long spade bit, I'm going to drill in from both sides, hopefully making the holes meet in the middle.
Ow, that's hot. Don't touch it. Yay! Look at that. I love it when a plan comes together. Now we need to bolt these legs on. To do that, I've got this giant stick of 3/8 all thread. We need to cut that down. I think it's a little bit too long. I just realized I didn't drill a recess when I drilled these holes in the legs to accept the washer. I don't want this to stick out past the edge. I'm going to pull these legs off real quick and drill a little recess in there. Here's a little quick tip, a side note if you will. Since I need to have this recess centered on here and I didn't do the recess ahead of time, in order to line it up, I'm going to just put the drill bit in there by hand. I can line up my hole. Then, without moving the piece, chuck my Forstner bit into the drill. Now my recess is centered. Now I can install the washer, the threaded rod. Come on there, little buddy. There you go. Ow! I always miss the good stuff on camera. I just got kicked in the head by a wooden cow. Ooh, man. I was messing with this, getting ready to attach the other side and gonna move the camera to a different angle, and I was wiggling this around and this thing came back and hit me like right, ow, right there. Ow. Bad cow. Woo. We'll try this again without him kicking me. Kicked by a cow. Well, it's not the first time. I can't believe the wooden cow kicked me. I'm using lock nuts to hold these legs on for two reasons. Number one, and probably the most obvious, is the fact that I don't want it to come loose and a leg fall off. But also I want it to be able to be adjusted so that it will stay in place. So if you wanted to, for some reason, the leg to sit right here, that it's gonna have enough tension on it to be able to stay there wherever you put it. And if it loosens up over time, you can just give it a little bit more tension to tighten it back down, keep it movable. Now, we need to attach the head. For that, we're going to use the router. I've made up this little jig which matches the profile of the head. And that way, I can clamp it in place on the piece and we can route a little channel in here, a little mortise I guess, and install the head. Lay down, cow. Lay down. Boy, this thing is stubborn, just like a real cow.
Now we'll just apply some more Titebond 3 and glue on his head. I had to do a couple of dry runs to figure out where the clamp needed to go so that it held the head right where it needed to be.
That's for kicking me. Well, I ended up letting the glue dry on his head overnight, and while I believe it's probably going to be strong enough, there's always that little probably in there, so I want to add a little bit of extra insurance just to make sure this little dude doesn't lose his head. I'm going to drill a hole at an angle through the lower part of his neck and then secure that with a screw. My head still hurts a little bit from when he kicked me yesterday. Just for that, I'm going to drill a hole in his rear end and glue in a tail. That's what you get for kicking me. To make his tail, I'm going to use some of this sisal rope. It's basically baling twine, only bigger around. Before I cut it off, I want to wrap the end I'm going to cut with some electrical tape just to help keep it from fraying.
A little ways up from the end of the tail, I'm going to apply a bunch of thin CA glue. This is going to allow me to unravel part of the rope and make it look more like a tail. The glue will just keep everything from continuing to fray.
Kind of looks like the end of a tail. Now, I did a couple of different tests to try to figure out the best way to attach this. I thought of some sort of a block that I could just screw this into. I tried gluing this into a hole with wood glue, and even the next day I was able to pull that out, so that didn't work too well. What I found to work the best really was just super glue. In my testing, I was able to glue it in super fast, and I could take the piece out and swing the block around, shake it all around, pull on it, tug on it. I couldn't get it to come loose, so that's what we're gonna do.
I'm going to glue this in using a very generous amount, let's call it, of thick CA glue. This particular glue is by Starbond. Starbond makes all kinds of really high quality CA glue. It is definitely my CA glue of choice, and if you guys want to save 10% off your order from Starbond, go ahead and use the link in the description.
I could drag him all over the place by his tail. He's not going to appreciate that, but it's not going to come off. It's pretty solid. To give our little guy some ears, I'm going to use some scrap leather and a template that I made out of, well, the cereal box. Now if I've punched all my holes in the right spot, I can fold each of these sides in. You can see his little ears coming together. Also kind of looks like a bow. Don't tell him he's wearing a bow. Now I'll just use some sheet metal screws with these little grommet washers. There's a name for them, but I can't remember what that is at the moment.
The last thing I need to do is drill some holes in the legs for attaching some ropes.
You're gonna be okay, little guy. It's just a hole in your leg. You're gonna live. It's okay. And that's gonna wrap up the build of our cow dummy. This was a fun build, even though it kicked me in the head. I'm telling you, that really hurts. I'm surprised there's not a giant goose egg there. You're gonna get dragged by a horse there, mister, just for that. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This was kind of a fun project trying to figure out different ways to do the ears and the tail and all around. I had a good time. Hope you guys did too. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.